Hello, and welcome to the Perry Connection. I'm your host, Jessie Barth, and with me in the studio is Colleen Klein.
Hi,
Thank you for coming.
you're welcome.
Now, you're a Perry girl, and can you tell me about your upbringing here in Perry? And you have a really interesting story and a interesting profession, so can you sort of set the stage
Sure.
for what you're going to be sharing?
So I grew up in Perry. I grew up over on a dairy farm on the west side of Silver Lake. Went to Perry High School. I was very involved in 4-H. I loved showing dairy cattle. I worked for my dad, milking cows.
And your dad?
Stan Klein.
Stan Klein, okay.
Yep. Feeding calves, milking cows, pretty much everything, that you could do on the farm. But the one thing I didn't get involved in as much as the cows, because I really love the cows, was field crops. So it's kind of interesting that I ended up in a field crops position at this point. But but as I think people do, by the time I graduated high school, I really didn't really want anything to do with agriculture.
Okay, let's just talk about that at this moment, and just talk a little bit about what it was really like growing up on a farm. It's just something is always happening on a farm. Can you just talk about what you loved about it and maybe what you didn't love?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for me to talk about that now because when I was growing up, I took it for granted. I mean, I took that for granted for a very long time. We were never bored. We didn't have the technology that kids have today, that my kids have. We didn't have cable. My parents didn't have cable until I was long moved out of the house. So, I think now about the times that my brother and I would spend all day long. We would just pack our backpacks and leave the house. We would go to the woods and, play in the creek and all the things that we were doing. We would build hay forts, and we joke and kid with my mom. Now we say, did you know where we were? Were you worried about that at all? And we laugh because it's just not the way things are anymore. So
there was a sense of freedom.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And especially for a girl, just to be out there.
I mean, all that stuff I didn't appreciate. I didn't, it was just kind of a little bubble.
And your brother, is he older, younger?
My brother's younger than me. I have actually 3 siblings. I have a brother and 2 sisters, all younger. My brother's still on the farm. And we see him pretty much every day.
Good.
Yeah.
And how many cattle or cows did you have?
We have about 200 milking cows, which for Wyoming County is a small farm.
Yes.
In other parts of the country, it's not, but here it is. And we have a really unique location because we're so close to the lake. Mm-hmm. So one thing I learned real early was about making sure that we are very responsible when it comes to the environment and the practices that we do on the farm, because it's so important to keep our drinking water source safe. So that was something I learned right out the gate, and has, carried with me still to this day.
And you being the oldest child, there's a sort of a responsibility there, isn't it? So often they're more confident, and
a bossy, somebody might say.
Were you a bossy older sister?
I was. I definitely, I didn't struggle with the oldest child role, and I think my siblings would agree to that.
So after high school then, where did you go to school?
When I graduated, I went to Brockport. I struggled when I graduated high school. I kind of got lost, I would say, for a few years.
In what way? Just not knowing what you wanted to do, or?
I think I just had, it was more of an internal struggle. I think I did really know what I wanted to do, but I also was in a space where you're pushing back against your parents or your dad, and you just want to get out of there and have fun. And I really walked away from I walked away from the farm. I walked away from my background, and for many years, actually. It wasn't until after I was out of Brockport, and I had my 2 girls. Kids really have a way of getting your head on your shoulders, bringing it around.
Of course.
That I had to have a moment and say, wait a minute, I'm not doing what I should be doing. I haven't put to use all of this experience that I have and the things that I really love. And so it was at that point that I went back to school, and I went to Alfred, and I went on and got a degree in ag business, and just, that set the ball in motion down the path that I should have been on to begin with. My parents are going to probably really appreciate hearing this.
Well, humility is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it really indicates wisdom, that you have the ability to step back and say, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. But like, what did you learn? If someone is watching this interview, either live or on YouTube, what did you learn that you would like to share with someone so that they perhaps might not experience what you did?
Put yourself first.
Okay.
Put yourself first. And really get comfortable with yourself. And I don't know how reasonable that is for a teenager or somebody that's 18 to get comfortable with yourself, because I don't know that I'm 100% there now. But that is something that I tell my daughters all the time. Mm-hmm. You have a boyfriend or you have friends, and that's very important, and those wonderful people, but you have to put yourself first. And, that's the number one thing that I would say mm-hmm. to somebody. And another thing is, it's okay not to take the path that everyone thinks that you should take. You don't need to go to a 4-year school right away. Right. If you don't know what you're going to do. Especially now. There's so many opportunities for kids, and that I would say too, and I'm encouraging my daughters, you don't need to start at a 4-year school. If you start at a 2-year school, and then you can build on your education as you go. If it doesn't work out after 2 years, you still have the degree, and off into the world you go. Or maybe you're not ready and you go to work. But don't do things because it's what society or everyone expects of you. Yeah. You got to listen to your
So you're
inner
really
voice.
Talking about your individuality.
Yeah.
And how each one of us is an individual. And so there isn't a cookie cutter way.
No.
So you broke away from that mold and are pursuing the life for you.
Yeah.
Good. Now, before we continue, please tell me the names of your daughters.
Riley and Harley.
Oh, pretty. Okay, and they are how old?
16 and 14.
And you'd never know it. You look like you're a teenager.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. Okay, so you got your ag degree.
Yep.
Then what?
So while I was finishing that up, an opportunity opened for me to do some independent study with Cornell Cooperative Extension in Warsaw. And I got to finish my degree doing a course down there. I was doing dairy farm business summaries, which I really loved. That was something I was familiar with. It was something that I was involved in on our home farm. I knew what that was about, so I really enjoyed doing that. And then that turned into employment. I worked down there for a couple of years, and then I went to work for the USDA Farm Service Agency in Warsaw.
U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And absolutely loved that because I got to see all the farmers in Wyoming County, and really just loved that.
So what was your job? What were you doing?
So in that capacity, you administer all the programs that come out in the Farm Bill. So we would do crop reporting, if there was disaster programs, anything like that would come through, was always changing. That's what we would do. But what I came to learn after about 5 years was that I felt like I was on the wrong side of the counter, because I was seeing farmers and I loved the farmers, but I wasn't working for farmers. I was working for the government. Mm-hmm. So I was like right there, but not quite where I needed to be, I felt.
And that was the U.S. government, not the state.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So then what happened? Did you make the correction?
Well, yeah. So everything happens for a reason. I think that's another thing that I would tell people, just kind of sometimes let it go, because things do happen for a reason. So one of my most favorite farmers used to come in the office. His name is Bill Jenkins. He was a farmer from Wyoming. He has such an amazing story. He was just a character. He was a ski instructor. He water skied right up into his 80s. He would always take his kids take his kids on vacations, and all of his children were extremely successful. So I would hang on his every word when he would come in the office. And he was a member of the New York Corn Soybean Growers Association. He would talk about his travels and his experiences with that organization. So one day he came in and he said, he was very casual with me. He said, "Hey, you want a new job?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know, what's the job?" So the organization was without an executive director at that point, and I just, I took the leap of faith.
Good for you.
Even my parents, my dad particularly, was nervous. Here I am. I was a single mom at the time. You're like, "You're going to leave a government job? That's very safe for you." Like, I am. And I went and
And were you in your 30s? Or late 20s?
Yeah, so that was 5 years ago, so I was about 35-ish.
Okay.
So interviewed, and he just said to me, you're going to get experiences in this job and you're going to meet people and go places that you'll never get if you stay here in this office. And I just went for it.
Good for you.
And he was right. He was right.
So you're working now in the corn and soybean.
Yes.
Soybean industry.
Yes.
Okay. And did you have any experience with that, crops? You said no, really.
Yeah, I had experience in the crops in terms of that, that's what you feed cows. I was a cow girl. I loved cows. Yep, we feed the cows. I know what that means in terms of feeding that crop to cows. But a lot of what we do, animal agriculture is the number one customer, so a lot of what we do is exactly that, dealing with dairies or other industries. Not so much in New York, but in the Midwest, you're feeding hogs, you're feeding chickens. So a lot of what we do does revolve around animal agriculture. But things that we do that I didn't know about are like the renewable fuels industry, ethanol, biodiesel, export markets. A lot of, I didn't have so much experience in the cash crop arena.
Okay.
But one can learn.
I'm sure you put your all into it.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've been doing it for about 5 years
Yeah,
now?
5 years. Yeah. It's time flies. I can't even believe it's
So
been 5
can
years.
you give us a day, a typical day before COVID and now with COVID?
The best part about this job is there is no typical day.
Okay.
When I'm not traveling, I do work from home, but we do so many different things. The organization is sort of two organizations in one. We are a lobbying organization on one part of it. We have members, and so we do lobby on the state and national level for policy. And that, going to Albany, going to DC, everything that goes around with talking to legislators is a completely different world than going to, say, a state fair and talking to kids at at the Dairy Cow Birthing Center. So I'm switching hats constantly.
And I bet you're good at that.
I do. I'd like that. If I had to do something that was monotonous, I wouldn't thrive in that area, even though I joke sometimes that I need to stop my mind, and if I could just do something simple for one day to get back on track. But no, I do really enjoy that. It affords me so many opportunities, whether we're talking to, I really like, usually in the spring, summer, there's a lot of school events that we go out to. We talk to young kids and talk to kids.
And what do you talk about?
It's pretty basic.
Are you trying to educate them about farms?
Yep, about farms, and you can get very creative. And the thing about talking to kids, and I shouldn't just put this on kids, because it's not just kids, that I've learned is when you think that you have come down very basic to talking about agriculture, you have to take it down even further. Because what I've learned...
It's not just agriculture.
Oh, it's not. Yeah, but it's very easy for me and a lot of people that work in ag to get going on their technical jargon and this and that, and you lose people very quickly. And then you got to hear a reminder, like I talked to a kid last week that didn't know that root crops grow underground, so they don't know that vegetables grow in the dirt. And then that's a quick reminder, okay, wow, we got to get...
Well, a lot of them probably think you just get it at the store in the freezer.
How would they know? I mean, there's only 2% of the population that's involved in agriculture at all. 2%.
Is that nationwide?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so what a task to try to talk to people about that. And that's where I'm most excited about our job, because when I tell people I work with corn and soybeans, it's like, wow, that's exciting. But it's about food.
Right.
And food, is one of our
It's a
basic
staple.
survival,
Exactly.
necessities. So people, including myself and everyone who eats, which is everyone, are very, very passionate about food. Whether you're growing it or eating it, people get very passionate. Sometimes not in a good way. um, so that's what I really love, because it's whether people are eating corn and soybeans, whether you're eating corn on your plate or we're feeding it to livestock that
Right.
you're eating, it all ends up on your plate.
Right.
Or theoretically, that's what it is.
And getting back to, was it Bill Jenkins?
Yeah.
Was he a farmer?
Yeah.
As opposed to a dairy farmer?
Yep, he was a
Okay.
crop farmer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did he mentor you along?
Yeah, he did. He did. Sometimes he was just such a wonderful man. He has since passed away. He passed away in 2017. But he was just one of a kind. That generation, very unfiltered, would say anything, would tell you how it was. But just the best advice, I think.
Common sense?
Absolutely, common sense, and had so many experiences that you couldn't. I mean, you really believed.
Yeah.
I really believe you. He knew. He knew.
Now, let me ask you this. You're a very attractive woman. Is there any sexism that you run into in this? Because you tend to think of agriculture as a male,
And
a
it
dominated industry.
And it is. And so that's a very interesting question, because where I grew up on our farm, I had two sisters and a brother. I guess a lot of the time I was probably acting more like a boy than a girl, until I got into my teenage years.
Being the bossy.
Yeah, bossy and all that. And it just wasn't a thing. I mean, that's just what I knew. And the other thing that I've come to realize is that even in New York, if you're a conservative person, which I grew up in a conservative family, a very conservative community, the most conservative of New Yorkers are pretty liberal if you head out to the Midwest. So one of the first meetings that I went to with the Corn Growers Association, there was a lot of talk. I mean, I had a whole segment of talk about, and I was so naive and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But there was a lot of talk among the other state directors that in the South specifically, they really struggled in their organizations with women on their boards. The women in a leadership role on their boards weren't accepted. There were things going on where the men would have their meeting, and then the men would have a second meeting where the women were not invited. And I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that was still happening today.
And we're talking like in 2015.
Oh yeah, I mean within the last 5 years.
Yeah. That almost seems illegal.
It's shocking. I mean, it was absolutely shocking, and my reaction was, aghast. And I think everybody probably thought, "Oh, great, here comes New York. We've got me," and this is going to be a problem. But so. I mean, nationally, there's a big push, as there should be, to make sure that women and minorities are involved in these organizations, which is difficult in an industry that is largely made up of 60-year-old white men. Mm-hmm. Where do you find these people from? How do you get other people involved, and how do you build that level of acceptance? And I'm not going to say that it's not an issue, because it is. Mm-hmm. It very much is.
So how do you personally handle it?
I'm just tough.
You probably just, I'm an individual. I don't think of me as a woman.
I don't. And sometimes I get myself into a little bit of trouble, because I did grow up one of the boys. I mean, I was always more inclined to hang out with males than females, and it just suited me more. So when I find myself in this world that's mostly men, I'm very comfortable, to the point that sometimes I forget. And if something happens or a comment's made, I'm taken aback, and it's like you do need to remember where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Good.
but
Well, and what's it like representing New York State? Is there clout there because it's New York State, the Empire State? Is that
it's
part of it as well?
it's interesting because New York has a reputation. Uh, and depending on where you come from, and lately it's been very interesting because New York came out first as the epicenter of COVID-19. So
Oh,
for
right, of
for a
course.
bit there, New York, it was like, ooh, nobody wants to go to New York. That's bad. And that was before anyone thought that this was going to affect the rest of the country. It was I really struggled because you could see when it started there was a lot of negative commentary about New York City, and it was New York City's fault and all the people there and who cares about them. And for me, working in agriculture, I think that people in urban areas, specifically for us in New York City, are the most important because that's who we're feeding.
Right.
So how can you say something like that? It was just deeply, deeply disturbing to me. I ended up on two COVID-19 task force for both the American Soybean Association and National Corn Growers Association. I think specifically because the Midwest isn't familiar with that type of dynamic so much that we have here, that rural-urban divide. Right. And New York also is so diverse in their agriculture. We have, so many crops that we grow here. We go to Iowa, there's corn and soybeans. That's it. Mm-hmm. So
and a huge dairy industry.
And huge dairy. All the things that I started to take a look at our membership, and almost all of our members, they don't just grow corn and soybeans. We have a member who runs an apple orchard. They're dairy farmers. They're potato farmers.
And wine. Grapes.
So many very interesting things. So we bring a very unique perspective to the table. The other thing is that New York is one of the leaders in the conversation on sustainability and climate change.
Oh, let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and are you part of that as
Every
well?
day.
Every
Yes.
day. Okay, so talk about that with the impact that has on your job. And
it is tough, but I choose to look at it as an opportunity instead of a challenge.
Good, let's stop. When did you learn to do that? Have you always seen an opportunity or a crisis as an opportunity?
No.
Okay, so when did you develop that wisdom to see
that? I don't know when that happened. I would say probably, I think when I took this job, I really started to think in that way. And the other thing is that people would often ask me why I took a job in corn and soybean and cash crops when my strength was really in dairy. But it has benefited me so tremendously to be able to take a step back from dairy and look at it in a different perspective. Because I think they call it the labyrinth theory. Mm-hmm. When you're in the labyrinth, you can't see the way out.
Right.
And then you take a step back and you can look. It's like, oh, wow, I understand that so much better looking at it from back here. Mm-hmm. Because now, from birth until, 18, really the only person teaching me about the dairy industry or about farming was within my small bubble. My parents.
Your dad and your mom
my
and
local community,
4-H.
the 4-H. And then that expands. So I had a big switch in mentality, I think, when I started to get out and look at things from the 30,000 foot view, and see what we do as a whole. There was a period in my life I was very defensive, and I think that's one of the things that you'll find in farmers is when somebody questions their practices or what they're doing, because the work is so hard.
Oh, yes.
The knee-jerk reaction when you feel like you're being criticized is to become defensive and angry.
Yes.
But unfortunately, that's not the way to bridge a gap with consumers, is to be defensive and angry. That will send them in the other direction. Mm-hmm. And at some point in time, I don't know, I just realized that when you get defensive and angry on any topic, whether it's food or climate or
parenting or
anything,
right,
you're not going to make friends. You're going to make more enemies. You're not going to find that common ground. So I don't know when there wasn't like a lightning strike moment. I think it just happened. It
Just
happened
with
gradually.
maturity, I think,
Yeah.
too. And is this anything that you do, and I want to get back to the climate change issue, but is this anything you do in terms of educating
Yeah.
the farmers so
Yeah.
that they learn sort of best practices in dealing with consumers?
Yeah. We try. It is ongoing, and New York is we what we're not good at is telling our story as farmers, because a lot of times farmers are ag, they think, well, this is just something that I do every day, it's not a big deal. Well, growing cover crops, we grow so many cover crops in New York, and
by cover crops you mean?
so we don't. So to put it in layman's terms, you wouldn't leave the soil bare. So if you had a corn crop and you took that off, you would plant it, put winter wheat down, so the soil is not ever bare. So you're preserving the soil. It's more complicated than that, but basically, you want to protect your soil at all costs, because they're not making more land.
Right.
So soil health, all of that is so important, and we do more of that in New York than they do in a lot of other states, and we just don't really talk about it. Mm-hmm. So when we start talking about climate and sustainability and all of those things, it's like, hey, we have that story. We're doing a lot of that. Let's talk about what we do instead of, I think that anytime that there is something that's a change, it's scary for people. Mm-hmm. And anytime something you've been doing for 50 years or 100 years, if it seems threatened, we want you to do something, or you feel like somebody in Albany is going to tell you what to do on your farm here in Wyoming mm-hmm. County. That's scary. Mm-hmm. It's
especially if you don't think they're right.
For sure.
Or you wonder what their motives are.
Yeah. You want to push back. Well, I don't know. They're not going to tell me to do that. They're not going to tell me. It's like, no. We need to talk about that. We have a place. We have a place in that narrative, and that's part of my job, is to tell that story to the people in Albany or Washington.
In a way, you and the farmers have the power, because you have the product that the public needs. Mm-hmm. To be sustained.
Yes, that is very true. And I think with that power comes great responsibility. Mm-hmm. You can't have that power and hang it over people's head. You can't say things like, well, we feed you, so, you're going to listen to us. That's not nice. That's not nice at all.
It's just not smart.
And it's not smart, and that's not the way that you use that type of power. So we although sometimes that's the easier message when you're feeling threatened. Mm-hmm. So if there's one thing one hill that I will die on, it will be that, to help farmers have meaningful conversations with people that are different.
Good. One thing I'm sensing about you, Colleen, is that you are passionate about this, and you love. This is not some job. No. This is your passion. And I bet everyone that you come in contact with respects you because they feel your passion, that you're not in this for yourself. You're really in it for the greater good.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, thank
for
you.
being
Thanks
that
for
way.
saying that. Yeah.
I bet they love you.
Well, I hope so.
I bet they even love a good fight. You know?
I am a fighter. I will fight people.
Well, I think
for a good reason.
Yeah, it's for the higher good, and yes, sometimes it's hard to learn, but when you see someone who can articulate the end product and do it with love, it's easier.
You couldn't. I don't think you could do a job like this, an advocacy job, if you didn't absolutely love it.
Right.
And that's what I think about. I think about my dad, I think about my grandfather, my brother, they're working, and everyone in the community here and across the state. I think about how they're working. They don't have time or desire at the end of that to go and tell their story in a passionate way. But that's what I can do for agriculture, and that's really what, I could get into all the specifics about the job, but that's really what it is.
So do you do interviews, a lot of interviews on television or NPR or that kind of thing?
I haven't been on NPR. This might be the gateway to that.
Well, we will have this up on YouTube.
Yeah, and it depends. It just depends on where we are, what pops up.
But so you are the spokeswoman,
I am.
spokesperson, I
Yes.
suppose
Yeah.
is what they
I
say.
try to get my farmers in front of the camera as much as possible. They really generally don't like that, but people like to see. They like to see farmers, like to hear from them. So we do. That's another thing we try to get them to do is to get out and do media training so that we have farmers that are more comfortable talking. You got to get out there if you want people to understand you. Got to get out there.
And what about recruiting younger people? How do you do that?
That
I mean, do you go to colleges? Do you go to 4-H's?
So one of the last we try to work with FFAs.
Oh, good.
Bring those kids in and let them know what we do. We have 2 events that we do throughout the year. We do a Winter Expo in Syracuse where we bring in national level speakers, and then usually, except this year, we have a summer crop tour which is on someone's farm. Same thing, bring in national level speakers and people can come. So what we decided to do this last year is bring in somebody totally different, and we went out and found a social media influencer in the ag arena. Some of the older members were like, what are we doing? We don't know this guy. Why would we bring him in? His name is a millennial farmer. He's extremely popular on social media. We had the biggest crowd that we've ever had at this event. More new members, young people, things like that. So it's that sort of thing.
Good for you.
Yeah, to bring them in. And I was so excited because we were going to do something similar for our summer crop tour. And of course we had to cancel it. So that was a bummer. But
Yeah.
we'll hopefully at some period of time we'll get back to normal and
Yes.
continue.
Yeah. And much wiser, I think, after this whole
Yeah.
pandemic experience. So how has COVID changed how you've operated? Can you just speak to that briefly?
Yeah. So prior to COVID, I traveled quite a bit. I traveled quite a bit during planting season in the spring and harvest in the fall. So when you're not dealing directly with farmers, you have a lot of time to go to meetings. So I would travel quite a bit to DC, the Midwest, and meetings all over.
And the meetings are just sort of sharing information, or
Yeah, so we're affiliated with a handful of national level organizations, the National Corn Growers, American Soybean Association, United Soybean Board, U.S. Export Council, Biodiesel. So we would get together with those organizations, and pretty much each state has an organization like ours. So there's a me in others in all the other states.
and I bet you get to know them.
Oh yeah,
You know, and
yeah.
you
I mean, those are some of my.
talk on the phone.
We talk on the screen now. Yeah.
This is pretty old hat. I
Yeah,
guess.
it's really fun because we're all doing the same job, and then you come
Right.
together several times a year and share about what we do, and it's,
Yeah.
much of what
Support
we do
each
is the
other.
same, and share ideas. I really always look forward to that, and you're going different places, meeting different people. So that has been the biggest change for me. No travel. And then it was sad. I mean, it was very sad in the beginning. Everything was so uncertain. Well, when am I going to see? When am I going to see my colleagues again? And what's happening? Nobody knew what was happening. But I think after about a month's time, all the organizations started to get into motion, and we pivoted to do different things that we didn't do before. So one of the things we did was there's an ethanol plant in Medina who changed over their operations very quickly to make hand sanitizer. So we worked with them to distribute the hand sanitizer to our members. So, and it really made me feel good, and I think it made our members feel good to know that their corn, which was being made into fuel, was now being made to help. And then just feeling like you could do something to help, it just made a world of difference. Sort of went from depressed to, re-motivated.
Part of the solution.
Yes, and the other thing that we did was we, the National Biodiesel Board does a lot of work with New York City. The entire municipal fleet in New York City runs on biodiesel. So the New York City Fire Department was doing a lot of work when this first broke out. And we partnered with National Biodiesel to provide meals to them. to the incident management team. I mean, they were doing things that I can't even fathom. I mean, they were setting up temporary morgues and having to go do just morbid things like finding bodies in apartment buildings, and I can't even wrap my mind around it. So for our organization to be able to provide meals to them while they were doing this, working around the clock, it just was wonderful. And our board, it was probably the most engaged project that our board has done so far.
Great.
And so then at the end of that, we gathered some of our members. So my significant other, they make New York chips, so they also are a member. So we took New York chips, we took apples from Waffler's Nursery, we took cheese from Craig Station Creamery, beef sticks from Wilson's Beef Farm. We packaged it all up into these big snack packs,
Nice.
and we took it down there. And it just built such a relationship out of a terrible time that,
Great.
it was...
Once again, it's seeing the opportunity in the crisis.
Yeah.
Good for you.
If you'd have told me 6 months ago that's what we would be doing in this capacity, I would not have believed you. But there we were.
Well, it goes to show how resourceful we tend to be as humans.
Yeah.
Exactly. Good. So, this is a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
But you enjoy it, and you were telling me earlier that you are gone for maybe 2 or 3 days, and you get home, so you can be the mom and a partner, and and it seems like you're balancing it pretty well.
For the most part, I don't want anyone to be misguided and think I have somehow perfectly figured this out, because I haven't. There's missteps all the time, and I think other moms and parents should know that. We always talk about work-life balance, but it's just really, you just do your best.
Well, I think, you love your job, you love your kids, you love your partner. It's the love will fill the cracks.
Yes.
I think, and as long as we keep that first, I think we as a culture, a community, will thrive.
Yeah.
Even in spite of what seems to be. Well, let's just start wrapping it up. Let's bring it all back to Perry. You still live in Perry, and why is that? And what do you love about Perry? And how do you just sort of promote Perry, in your heart?
Yeah. So Perry, I mean, Perry is a small community. It's where my family is, and that is what's most important to me. I mean, y'all could move to a different state that people say is cheaper to live there or whatever. My family's not there, so that's why would I do that?
I'm sure your parents, are so thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, it was so difficult, especially for my dad. When one of my sisters, actually, at one point in time, both of my sisters moved out of state, and that was very difficult for him. So family, and just really, I think that small town feel, and we are close enough to urban areas where you can have that experience. And I mean, I'm a living example that you can go out and experience the world but still live in small town, USA.
You have the best of both worlds.
The best of both worlds. You can do it. It is actually possible. And my kids, that's what I want for them. They have started down the path. We're there in their second year of growing sunflowers. My dad and brother let them have a few acres to grow sunflowers, so they have a cut flower business. They have a little roadside stand, and they go down to the farmer's market, and they sell their sunflowers down there. And I, watching them do that and help build a sense of community in Perry, you wouldn't think, I mean, it's a sunflower. Everybody loves sunflowers.
Yes,
and especially in this time, it just makes people feel happy.
Yes. Well, I was at the local farmers market in Perry last Saturday.
Well, they were there.
Yes.
Yeah. So, that's just been really wonderful, and I want them to be proud of their community, and I want them to contribute to their community. I think it's real easy to get negative and talk about, well, it's not the same as it was in yesteryear, or this could be better than that, but you got to do something. That's right. And I want them to do something and feel proud about what they did. So those are my thoughts about Perry.
Good.
Still a good place.
It's a beautiful, beautiful place. A lot of beautiful people here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Well, I'm so glad I met you, Colleen.
You too.
It was really Kyle Adamczak, our producer, who met you and just said, you've got to interview Colleen. So thank you for coming on
You're welcome.
relatively short notice.
Yeah.
And I wish you all the best
Thank
with
you.
your career, your family. And, I just see a big future for you. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Perry Connection.